Hello, I'm Kristen. This is Kristen Craves Books. So it is almost summertime, and I would definitely call myself a seasonal reader, especially when it comes to summer and fall. I really lean hard into the stereotypical summer reads, fall reads, around those times of year. So I was thinking about what a summer read means to me, and I've broken this down into 4 different categories. That makes sense for me, and I thought I would give you recommendations in case you're the similar kind of reader. So the first category is lighthearted, fun, contemporary romance, because that is what I love to read outside by the pool or sitting on my deck or on the beach. I just love to fly through sweet romances. They just make me happy this time of year. Then the second one is fast-paced thrillers, because for similar reasons as romance, I just love to have a book on the beach that I'm just turning the pages and the water's in front of me and there's no distractions, and I can just get through a thriller in a day or two. It's just so fun. I have a lot of great memories of reading thrillers on the beach, and that's when I do a lot of my thriller reading. And then the third category is just summery vibes, because there are some books that are just set in the summertime. They're set in warm places. They just have that atmosphere that screams summer, so I do have a few of those. And then the last one is actually big books, because I do think I get my best reading done in the summertime. I just feel like my cat is moving my camera. That's okay. I just feel like I have more time in the summer to get through some bigger books, and because I'm outside, I just don't feel like I'm as intimidated by them in the summer for some reason. So I have a few of those that I can recommend as well. So we'll start with the first category, and that is light contemporary romance. So the first one, even this cover screams summer to me, and this is You Had Me at Ola by Alexis Daria. And Alexis Daria actually has a book coming out, I think September 14th, sometime in September, called A Lot Like Adios. So now would be the perfect time to read this one by her. And this one is actually, I have realized that I love books, especially romance, where one or more of the characters are a celebrity. I know a lot of people don't like that, but something about that really, really works for me. So in this one, both of our characters, her main characters, are celebrities, and they meet each other on this telenovela, this set, and we get chapters of the telenovela in here, and then that parallels with their real life romance, and it's really sweet. They have an awkward first meeting. It's not hate to love by any means, but they the cat, but they are awkward at first, and it just slowly evolves, and there's actually a lot more depth, and we get a lot of their backstory in here, and it's just really beautiful, and I would love to see this adapted. But yes, highly recommend this one, and then pick up her next release when it comes out in September. And then the next one is actually a series. The first one is The Kiss Quotient, then I have The Bride Test, and the third one is actually The Heart Principle, which comes out in August. It is one of my most anticipated books of all time. I feel like I've been waiting for that third book for ages, because The Bride Test is arguably my favorite romance, but there's a side character in here, Quan, who's going to be the lead in the third book, and I just adore him. So I think that has the potential to become my new favorite. But these are all just beautifully written. Helen Huang is amazing. She writes characters who are on the autism spectrum, and the representation in here is wonderful. The chemistry between the characters is amazing. I love some of the conversations in here. It's just, these are really, really fun. Perfect to read on the beach. I'm slowly collecting my favorite romances, so I don't have them all. I have more that I could recommend for this video, but that would be a separate one. I don't want it to all be a romance, but there's 2 that I read recently that I really think would be fun for summer. And the first one is called First Comes Like. And what's so great about this one is, as I said, I love books with celebrities. Both of the characters in this book are celebrities. One is actually an influencer. She has a YouTube channel, which I just think is fun. And then the other one is, he's a Bollywood actor who's come to Hollywood. And they have a fake engagement, but it's just really sweet and respectful, and it's set in California, it's set in Hollywood, so there is that summery California vibe to it. And this is actually the third book in the Modern Love series, but I've only read this one, so they do read as standalones. I think some of her roommates in this were characters from the first 2 books, but I don't think I missed any context really not having read those. But it would be fun to go back and read the first and second, and then this third one. Those would all be great to read on the beach. So I do think that that's a fun one, and it deserves to be talked about more. Then the last contemporary romance I'm going to recommend in this video is Sweet Hand, and this is by N.G. Peltier. And I actually just read this in June. I got the audiobook from Libro FM, but I do have a copy on the way because it's beautiful. The cover is amazing, but I just love the chemistry in here. This is hate to love. Our main characters, they definitely have, there's some hate there. They grew up together, they've known each other a long time, but they've never really gotten along, and there's lots of misunderstandings in here. But it's set in Trinidad and Tobago, so you get that summery vibe in here. It's set by the water. Our main character, she is a baker. There's something about that that's so fun to me. It does take place over the course of the wedding season, so that is also summery. But the chemistry in here is incredible. I just thought this was really, really fun. Perfect beach reading. And now we're gonna move on to fast-paced thrillers, suspense, mysteries, that kind of thing. And I actually only own one of the ones I'm gonna talk about today, despite some of these being my favorite books, because I listen to thrillers on audio usually because they just work really well that way. So I can see myself lying on the beach, lying on the deck, getting some sun, with sunscreen of course, and having my headphones in and just escaping through a thriller that way. But this one here I do own and I highly recommend. It is Pride and Premeditation by Tirzah Price. I feel like I've talked about this a lot, and this is probably the lightest book I'm going to recommend today. If you're not a mystery person, a thriller fan, I still think you're gonna like this one because it does read more like a cozy mystery. And if the title didn't give it away, this is a Pride and Prejudice retelling, and it's so fun to see these characters in a new light. So there, Elizabeth Bennet's in here, Mr. Darcy in here. Bingley has actually been accused of murder, and Darcy and Elizabeth are working together to find out who the real murderer is. And there were lots of surprises in here, and it was just fun to see all the characters that I love in a new setting. And this is the first book in a series, so highly recommend that. Even this cover screams summer to me. Then the next one is actually one, it might just be my favorite thriller, and calling it a thriller kind of does it a disservice because I don't know that it really is. If somebody went into this expecting it to be so many twists and turns, it's really not that. And that is The Good Sister. And what's so great about this one is the characters. We are following sisters, which I always love, and in this one you get both of their perspectives and it's happening at the same time. So we follow Fern and her story, and then we follow Rose and her stories through her diary, but they're parallel. So what happens in Fern's, Rose is writing about in her diary. So it's interesting, and they have a really complex relationship. Fern is on the autism spectrum, and Rose has always kind of taken care of her and looked out for her, and Rose realizes that she can't have a baby, so Fern offers to have a baby for her. But then Fern meets somebody, falls in love. It's really sweet. It's almost like a romance in that way. So I do think that that element of it could be appealing to people who don't read as much as many thrillers or who likes romance in the summertime. So that's really interesting. But you know that this is a thriller, so there's this underlying tension the entire time you're reading, and you just get so connected to Fern that you don't want this to be a mystery because you just want it to end well for her. But it's really well done, and I highly recommend it. I think you could easily finish that during a day on the beach. And then the next one is Don't Look For Me by Wendy Walker. I read this last year, and I think it was my favorite thriller of 2020 because of the pacing. You won't want to put this one down. I actually listened to this on audiobook as I was walking around my neighborhood, which wasn't the best thing to do because I'm walking alone and you're reading about or listening to the story of this woman who is kidnapped. But it's so good. So we're getting her perspective as she's navigating her way through this situation, and it was just so well done. I don't think you'll be able to put this one down. The next one I want to talk about is I Let You Go by Claire McIntosh, who has a new book coming out. I see it everywhere on Bookstagram. That's called Hostage, and I really want to read that one. But I Let You Go is my favorite of hers that I've read so far, and there's something that happens in here that completely blew my mind. I'm not going to say anything more about the story. This is a book you just have to trust me on. You just have to go into this and go for the ride, because I went into this completely blind. Blew my mind. It is really fast-paced, really fun. You're going to be sitting outside or reading on the beach or something, and you're going to want to scream and embarrass yourself because what happens in here is just wild. The next one I actually think is perfect because it's called The River by Peter Heller, and though it wasn't my favorite thriller, I do still think it was fun and interesting and a perfect thriller for the summertime because it does take place on a river. The entire story, we're following two best friends who are going on a fishing trip down the river in a canoe, and things just go terribly for them. It is so fast paced. Oh, it keeps you on the edge of your seat. It's very upsetting at times, but it's really well done. It takes place on the water, so it's a perfect summer thriller. And then the last one is The One by John Mars. I actually read this with my best friend last summer, and he is not a big reader, but he will pick up a thriller once in a while, and we just raced through this. It was so much fun to read this with him. And this is a story about a dating app where you're matched with your soulmate through your DNA, and we're following different characters who have been matched with their soulmates, and one of them is actually a serial killer. We see how all these relationships play out, and there's some good twists in here, and it's actually been adapted into a Netflix TV show, and my friend, he did watch it. He enjoyed it, but he said it's way different than the book. But it would be fun to watch the show after you read the book in the summertime. I do want to watch the show at some point this summer. So those are all the thrillers that I'm going to recommend for the summertime. And now I'm going to talk about some books that just have a summery atmosphere. And the first one is, I knew I had to talk about this one. It's The Names They Gave Us by Emily Lord. And I keep meaning to read more from Emily Lord because I've heard all her books are amazing, and I love this. It's so beautifully written, and it's actually set at a summer camp. So that's all you need to know, right? I need to read more books set at a summer camp. But this is full of great, interesting characters, some really moving friendships, and here it is a really bittersweet book, but it'll give you all the summer vibes, and it is really well done, and it is YA, I should say, but I really, really loved it. Would it be one of my videos if I didn't talk about Tiffany D. Jackson? I could have talked about any of her books in the thriller section of this video, because the rest of her books, other than this one, I would say are thrillers, and I did read them last summer and loved them. So allegedly her first one, Grown, anything by her, Monday's Not Coming, pick those up. But if you want something a little bit lighter, but this is still sad, it's Let Me Hear a Rhyme, and this is following these three friends, and her brother passes away, and she becomes really close with his two best friends because they decide that they want to make him famous. He was a singer before he died, so they take his music and decide to make him like an anonymous star. And it's really sweet. It's really sad. It's set in the 90s or in the summertime in New York, so you're gonna get a lot of nostalgia, and it's really just a love story to hip-hop and to friendship. It's so sweet, so bittersweet, but really, really well done. And it's the first book of Tiffany D. Jackson's that I read, so I'll always have a special place in my heart for it. Next is one that is actually literary fiction, and it's one of my favorite books of all time. I think it might be, I did a video about my favorite books of all time, and I definitely think this was in the top 5. And it is Bitter Orange by Claire Fuller. And no other book has ever made me physically feel so hot. Like, you know when you read a book that's really atmospheric and you can just feel it? Like Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden, that one you can almost feel the coldness right to your bones. This one was sweltering, and it was suffocating both in the atmosphere and the climate that the characters were in, but also in the tension and just the relationships between them. So we're following a character who is hired to look at the gardens at this old estate, and below her is this couple that she becomes kind of obsessed with, and there's a hole in her bathroom floor and she can look down and see them in their bathroom. But then she kind of forms a relationship with them that's very tense, and there's really great twists in here. This one had my just on the edge of my seat, so it's almost got thriller elements, but it's definitely literary fiction. But if you want a tense book that you just feel, Bitter Orange is the one for you. And she has a book that just came out, Unsettled Ground, that I think is probably good for summer as well, and I'm going to pick that one up soon. Now the next one I almost feel silly talking about because this is going to be the book of the summer. Everybody's read this or is going to read it because everybody loves this author, but I can't not talk about it because it's a perfect summer read, and it might be my favorite of hers that I read. And it is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This cover screams summer. It's set in Malibu. It's Taylor Jenkins Reid, so you already know that it's really fast paced. It's great characters in here. The story takes place over the course of 24 hours as the siblings are preparing for their annual party. But we also get flashbacks to how their parents met, to their childhood. Nina, I would say, is the main character in here. She's the oldest sister, and I felt so attached to her. I was really invested in her story, and there's lots of family drama, but it's also really, really sweet. And the family owns like a little restaurant, and I don't know, it just screams summer to me. They're all surfers, so much about this is perfect in my eyes. Might be my favorite of Taylor Jenkins Reid's book, and I definitely think this is going to be the book of the summer. The last one I want to mention, I do own, but I don't have it with me right now. And this one gets mixed reviews, which I can understand, and it's Sex and Vanity by Kevin Kwan. And I think part of the problem is people compare it to Crazy Rich Asians, and it does have similar vibes. It is as vivid, I would say, as Crazy Rich Asians, but it's completely different in many ways. But the first half of the book is set in Capri at a wedding. Screams summer to me. Some great family drama in there, some great little romance going on in there. I loved our main character. The second half takes place in New York, and it's not as good. The second half is not as strong, but I think it's worth reading. It's still a fun family drama, still a good romp, and I had fun with it. So my last category is big books, so really you can read any big book that you're interested in for this one, but I do have 3 recommendations. And the first one I could have put into the thriller category, but I wouldn't say this is fast-paced because it is, I think, like 600 and something pages, yeah. And that is Night Film by Marisha Pestle. And this is actually one of the first thriller slash horror books that I ever read, and it really has stayed with me. What's fun about this, let me show you in here, is that there is mixed media in here. And I would actually say that this is more of a horror, but if you're looking for a unique reading experience that will give you nightmares, this is the one for you. And I think you can probably find this pretty cheap. I always see this for sale at Chapters for like $5 or $8 or something, and that's where I picked up my copy. But if you want a fun, unique reading experience this summer, highly recommend Night Film. The next one is so underrated, and that is The Glittering Hour by Iona Gray. And this is a book that's set in the 1920s and in 1938 or something like that. So we're in 2 different timelines following 2 different characters, but the main character here is Selena, and she is a bright young thing in the 20s, so she's partying, drinking, and we follow her story as she falls in love, gets into trouble, that kind of thing. And it's really, really a moving book, and it reads quicker than you would think. And there's something about 1920s New York that I think is just fun for the summertime. Speaking of, my last recommendation that I don't have with me right now because I've lent it out is City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert. And I read Eat, Pray, Love. I've read some of her others and I didn't like them, but City of Girls blew my mind. I'm so glad that I gave that book a chance. And it's a big book, but it's worth it. So we're following Vivian over her lifetime, but we're really focused on her early 20s as she moves from her small town to New York to live and work with her aunt who owns a theater company. So she meets a lot of new people that are completely different from the people that she's known all her life. She has new experiences, she gets into trouble, she has different romances, and it's just really, really fun. And I love seeing her grow and the lessons that she learned, and then her in her adulthood and in her old age. It's just really, really a sweeping novel that I think is really fun, set in New York. Something about it just screams summertime to me. So those are all my summer recommendations. I would love to know if you are a seasonal reader or if you've read any of these. And thanks for your time. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye for now.